Let's start with those results. It took us into late in the night to find out that Doug Jones had won so narrowly, but significantly, obviously. How did he do it, Lindsay?
The big story here is the African-American turnout for the Democratic candidate Doug Jones. You know, the numbers, the percentages that came out to this election rival what we saw for presidential elections with the first African-American president, Barack Obama. Black voters, especially black women, were motivated to vote not just for Doug Jones, but against Roy Moore. And that sort of leads to the other big turnout factor here, Heather, and that is that a lot of Republicans who traditionally would come out and support any Republican candidate probably just couldn't stomach this one. In fact, a turnout was low in areas that you might expect it to be high for a Republican, and there's a whole write-in campaign. What that meant was that a number of Republicans went to the polls and wrote in the name of a different Republican, not Moore, in a sort of a protest. That's something their senior senator advised them to do. That's what he said he did on Sunday morning shows, and the number of people who did that could have made a difference, pushing it over the edge for Doug Jones.
So taking a look at that, I mean, when you talk about the history there in Alabama and the reddest of red states, we know that Jeff Sessions was such an overwhelming favorite in this very race in 2014. Now he's Attorney General, of course, but the Democrats didn't even run a candidate. And Trump defeated Hillary Clinton soundly, more than 20 points, when in the presidential race. So the fact that Doug Jones has won this, what does it mean for Washington politics, both short and long term, Lindsay?
Let's start in the short term. Remember, the Republicans don't have a significant legislative achievement. They need to pass their tax cut bill, and they want to try to get that done before Christmas, because after Christmas, their slim majority in the Senate will get even slimmer when Doug Jones joins them. So watch for the push on that and concessions perhaps to reluctant Republicans. But the big story here is the failure of the presidency, Donald Trump, his influence to put a Republican in the Senate. It is an embarrassment, and that will have a significant impact on the midterms. A lot of Democrats believe that they have the wind in their sails right now. But remember, establishment Republicans, they're feeling pretty good too, because they weren't so keen on inviting Roy Moore into the Senate, and this solves that problem for them.
Lindsay, thank you so much. Lindsay Duncombe live in Montgomery, and she'll be standing by for ongoing coverage for us here on CBC News Network. Now, one of the things that Lindsay was, of course, mentioning here is the fact that the women, the voters of women, a key demographic bloc which propelled Doug Jones to victory, we're getting some reaction from women, famous female politicians, and indeed some of Roy Moore's accusers reacting to what happened in Alabama. Tashana with those details.
Of course, Heather, I mean, according to those exit polls, this win, of course, being bolstered by women in the state of Alabama. But when we talk about this particular voting demographic, you can't ignore, of course, the allegations of sexual misconduct that, of course, had been making headlines leading up to this election. So tying, of course, those allegations tying Roy Moore to underage young women. And all of those allegations, of course, a huge part of this election. So Moore, of course, denied all of those allegations by his accusers, but we're hearing from them this morning, reacting to the vote. One of those people is she was a young woman when she alleged that Roy Moore groped her in his office. She had been watching intently, of course, as the vote unfolded last night. Her name is Tina Johnson, and here's what she had to say. Take a listen.
I am just thrilled that, you know, that speaking out did make a difference, and that we won't be silenced anymore, and that no matter where you at or what you do, you can speak, you can tell what happened, and someone will listen, and it will make a difference.
Now, along with Tina Johnson, we had also heard from another accuser this morning, Beverly Young Nelson. She had alleged Roy Moore assaulted her when she was a teenager, and she says she believes her story, as well as the other women who came forward, did have an impact. Here's what she told CNN this morning. Roy Moore's loss means to me that Alabama is about to make some changes, and I believe it's going to be on the positive side of things. I feel like my story might have played a part in this, but I think the other victims as well. So, of course, a huge win for Democrats, and And considering that, just a year ago, Donald Trump took about 62% of the vote in Alabama, definitely a huge turnaround, and many people saying women being a big part of that end result.
Well, we'll be talking more about the implications with a political writer later in the hour. And to Shauna, thank you very much for that part of the story in Alabama.